Real quick, as with every Outer Wilds video, I'd like to give you guys a massive spoiler warning. I'm sure plenty of you who are seeing this video have already played through the game and just can't get enough of Outer Wilds content, or the story made no sense to you and you want to know a little bit more about what's going on. But if you haven't given it a go yet, Outer Wilds is my favourite game of all time, and my experience wouldn't have been the same if I didn't get the opportunity to go into it blind and spoiler free. This is a game that can only be played once, and for me, that single playthrough impacted me in a way no other game ever has. But anyways, how did the Nomai's Ash Twin project work, and did they genuinely intend on blowing up a solar system for their own scientific advancement? Well, let's get into it. How the Ash Twin project and the time loop actually work has been a major point of discussion in the Outer Wilds community for years, primarily because of just how complicated the story gets when you really dive into it. Even in my previous video, I misunderstood exactly what the time loop really meant. So if you've seen that video and heard me talk about how the Nomai were willing to decimate the solar system, prepare for me to correct myself here. While my statement may not have been false, technically, it's a lot more nuanced than that, and I left out a lot of important information. To begin with, we have to look at the type of time travel that Outer Wilds falls into. It's actually quite unique, different from most movies like Back to the Future or The Terminator. In those movies, the characters are moving into the past to change the present. In Outer Wilds, the Ash Twin project and the time loop involve sending memories and data from the future into the present, so the Nomai can get information which hasn't actually been discovered and ultimately will never be discovered. Let me explain. The primary aspect of time travel I want to tackle is causation. If you have cause and effect and you remove the cause, the effects cannot have come into fruition. For example, if I go back in time and stop your parents from meeting, you cannot possibly exist because there is no longer anything to have caused your existence. Even the ridiculously complicated movie that is Tenet, where one of the main philosophies is what's happened, binds itself to causation. Characters frequently move to the past to influence the present. This means that the characters are living in a world that has already been influenced by their future actions, yet they must still continue to carry out these actions in the future, or else the present cannot possibly exist in the way that it does. We see that Outer Wilds binds itself to causation in a small and mostly unnoticed feature of the High Energy Lab on Ember Twin. When the black and white holes are powered, you can send a little scout into the black hole, and because of the negative time interval, it will begin exiting the white hole before it's entered the black hole. If you remove one of the holes while the little scout has exited the white hole but not yet entered the black hole, the result will be a second duplicated little scout. This goes against causation, as nothing could have caused the second scout to exist if the first never actually entered the black hole. And as we can see, this destroys the fabric of space-time, literally shattering the universe. However, material things are not treated the same as data and memories in Outer Wilds. We can see while playing the game that at the end of each loop, it's impossible to make changes that survive the loop. Everything gets reset, apart from one thing: the ship's log. Your discoveries and findings all remain stored in the ship's log after a loop has ended and you're sent 22 minutes back in time. There is actually a canon reason for this. Hal mentions to the hatchling after the statue activates that Slate, another Harthian, repurposed a part of the statue that chipped off in your computer. This means that the ship's computer can keep all the same memories that you do through the loops, and this can occur without destroying the fabric of space-time. You're probably wondering why all of this is relevant to the 22-minute time loop in the game, but this is the fundamental principle that the Ash Twin project was built on. In the eyes of causation, matter and memories are separate, and the fact that memories can exist without needing a cause is why the Nomai were willing to go to the extreme lengths of inducing a supernova to get the coordinates to the eye of the universe. They'd never actually have to blow up the sun. To help this make sense in the context of the game, let's actually look at how the Ash Twin project was intended to work. As we know before the game takes place, The probe has already gone through over 9 million loops to find the eye, so let's begin with what those loops would have looked like. The orbital probe cannon around Giant's Deep would fire the probe in a random direction, hoping to find the eye. Thanks to the Southern Observatory on Brittle Hollow, the Nomai already knew the distance of the eye and that it would take the probe 22 minutes to reach that distance. When the probe failed to find the eye, it would send this data back to the probe tracking module, the part of the cannon that crashed into the depths of Giant's Deep when the cannon falls apart. At the same time, the Sun Station would cause the Sun to go supernova, powering the Ash Twin project and sending the data from the probe tracking module 22 minutes back in time. Back at the beginning of the loop, the cannon would now fire in a different direction to before, now that it knows at least one direction where the eye wouldn't be found. This process has been repeated over 9 million times for the probe, being repeatedly sent in a different direction over and over again, and each time narrowing down the search for the location of the eye. However, no one else has been part of this loop because only the probe tracking module has been paired to one of the memory masks in the Ash Twin project. This changes, however, when the probe finally does locate the eye of the universe. Now, for the Nomai, the intention was to never even experience a time loop themselves. From their perspective, they will be ready to activate the Sun Station when suddenly, the probe tracking module receives the coordinates to the eye. The probe would still be seen firing automatically in the night sky above Giant's Deep, because a command would still be sent back in time by the previous probe in the future, a future which would never actually happen. However, now that the Nomai had the coordinates, there was no longer any need for the time loop, and thus no need for the Sun to go supernova. The entire Ash Twin project would be shut off, including the Sun Station, and the Nomai would be free to go in search of the eye of the universe, leaving behind a perfectly healthy star and the early Harthian life forms. Of course, this isn't exactly how the journey to the eye would ultimately go. For the Nomai, they were unable to cause the Sun to go supernova. The Sun Station failed, much to the dismay of the two Nomai who worked on it, Idea and Pi. Before they were able to figure out a new way of achieving their goal, the interloper entered the solar system, carrying a deadly pressurized case of ghost matter with it. Just as the Nomai had begun investigating this new celestial object, the case of ghost matter ruptured, immediately killing every one of the Nomai throughout the solar system. However, the Ash Twin project did not fail. 281,042 years later, the Sun goes supernova naturally as it's reached the end of its lifespan, along with the other stars throughout the dying universe. This supernova powers the Ash Twin project, sending a command to the orbital probe cannon 22 minutes in the past to fire. The cannon fires, and 22 minutes later, the probe fails to find the eye, and the Sun goes supernova again. This repeated 9,318,053 times, until finally the probe found the eye of the universe. The Nomai memory statues and masks were programmed to activate either if the project failed as a failsafe so the Nomai could go back and fix whatever went wrong, or to activate if the project succeeded and the probe found the eye of the universe. And the hatchling just so happened to be passing by the statue when this happened, as well as Gabbro over on Giant's Deep. Bringing them into the never-ending loop the probe has also been stuck in for 390 years. So, to summarise, the Nomai's plan would mean gaining the eye's coordinates without ever having actually found it. The probe that in some other future located the eye would never actually do so. The Nomai never desired to destroy an entire solar system. For example, imagine if I watched the lottery numbers get called out on TV, and then travelled back in time and bought a ticket with those numbers on it. I would have those numbers without ever having actually watched the programme. That's exactly what the Nomai intended to do, just with science and not millions of dollars. The Nomai were focused and efficient, but they weren't heartless. Idea even opposed the construction of the Sun Station, and Cycad did everything in his power to protect the early Harthian life while they were mining ore from Timber Hearth. Unfortunately though, their efforts to protect the solar system and Harthians were futile. The state of the universe for the hatchling was dying, and they found themselves stuck in a loop permanently just 22 minutes away from the obliteration of everything that they know. Of course, the hatchling would go on to find the coordinates and travel to the Eye, birthing a new universe in the wake of a dying one. The way this happens is poetic and highlights the significance of memories in Outer Wilds, just like how they're treated differently to physical matter in terms of causation. The new universe that's formed from a conscious observer, the hatchling, entering the Eye, is formed based off of the hatchling's personal experiences and memories. We see that depending on the characters the hatchling interacted with, the final universe appears differently. Normally, the new universe features only Halthians as the present life forms, because the hatchling doesn't know that life can exist in other forms. If you meet Selenum, the new universe includes insectoid life, because the hatchling now has the data that life can evolve in vastly different ways. Similarly, if you find the prisoner, a new bipedal species appears in the final sequence. By sharing a vision with the prisoner, the hatchling learns that the fear of the unknown can be overcome and that the cycle should continue. Without these memories, the hatchling's limited perspective would result in a much emptier new world. In the end, we find that matter is subject to the loop. It repeats, decays, and fades, but consciousness is the anomaly. It's the only thing that can cross that barrier and breathe life into the dying, escaping the rules of causation and space-time. The Eye is a canvas, but it's a blank one. It requires a witness to give it form, and by carrying Selenum's memory or the prisoner's song into that final space, you no longer witness the birth of a new universe, but shape it.